Before the world had a name, before the first star was struck into being, there was a moment of longing so deep that it tore a seam in eternity. Her name was Sophia, wisdom, the one who reached beyond what she was given because she could not stop herself from wanting to know. And when she fell, she did not fall alone. Fragments of her light scattered into everything that would ever breathe, into stone, into water, into you. But before she was pulled back into the fullness, she left one instruction behind. One single instruction, buried in the deepest part of the human soul, sealed until the person carrying it was ready to hear it. And if you are here right now, listening to these words instead of scrolling past them, that seal has already begun to break. This message is not for everyone. It is for the one who has always felt like a visitor in their own life. Stay with me, because what she left was written for you. You have always known something was different about you. Not in an arrogant way, not in a way you could ever explain to the people around you without sounding strange, but in a quiet way that followed you from childhood. You looked at the world, and it did not fit. You listened to people talk about what mattered, and something in your chest went silent. You went along with it. You learned the words. You performed the expected life. But underneath all of it there was a low hum, a signal you could never quite tune into, always just beneath hearing. That hum is not confusion. That hum is memory, and Sophia placed it there deliberately. Say, Amen, if you have felt that hum your whole life. I want you to go back for a moment, back further than you usually allow yourself to go. There was a version of you that existed before the world got its hands on you, a child who did not yet know that there were correct answers. That child asked questions that made adults uncomfortable. That child stared at things too long. That child felt the weight of a room the moment they walked into it and could tell you, without any evidence at all, which person in that room was carrying something heavy. And somewhere along the line, that child was told to stop. Maybe not in those words. Maybe it was a look. Maybe it was laughter. Maybe it was the slow accumulation of 1,000 small corrections until the child learned that the safest thing to be was ordinary. That child did not die. That is the thing nobody tells you. That child went underground. They took the knowing with them, and they built a room beneath your life, and they have been sitting in it ever since, waiting for the day you would come back down and open the door. Every strange grief you have felt in the middle of a perfectly good day, that was them knocking. Every time you cried at something that should not have made you cry, a piece of music, a sentence in a book, the sight of an old man eating alone, that was them speaking through the floorboards. Here is what you were never told. The heaviness you carry is not depression in the way the world defines it. It is not a chemical accident or a personal failure. It is homesickness. You are a fragment of light wearing flesh, and flesh was never designed to hold what you are without some ache. The ache is not a defect. It is the proof of your origin. Every time you felt out of place at the dinner table, every time you smiled through a conversation while your spirit stood at a distance watching, that was not brokenness. That was the light in you, refusing to fully settle into a world it does not belong to. And I want you to stop apologizing for it. For years, you have tried to fix yourself. You have read the books. You have taken the advice. You have tried to become the version of yourself that the world would finally approve of. And every time you got close, something in you rebelled. You sabotaged it. You walked away. You felt a strange grief in the middle of your own success. People called you inconsistent. They called you difficult. Maybe you started to believe them. But hear me clearly. You were not failing to fit in. You were being protected from a life that would have swallowed the very thing you were sent here carrying. Think about how many times you almost became someone else. There was a job that would have set your life on rails and something went wrong at the last minute. There was a person you almost married and the whole thing came apart for reasons that still do not fully make sense to you. There was a city you almost moved to, a version of your life that was fully drawn up and ready, and then quietly cancelled. You have grieved those cancellations. You have replayed them and wondered who you would be now if any of them had gone through. I will tell you who you would be. You would be comfortable, you would be settled, and you would be asleep. That is the trade that was on the table every single time, and every single time something intervened on your behalf, and every single time you called it bad luck. Sophia's fall was not a punishment. That is the lie the world built its entire structure on. The story most people are told is that curiosity is dangerous, that reaching is arrogance, that the ones who ask too many questions get cast out, and so people learn to shrink. They learn to accept the answers they are handed and never look behind them. But her fall was a seeding. When she descended, she scattered her light on purpose, because a world without light would have been a closed room forever. She chose to be broken so that pieces of her could be everywhere. And one of those pieces is sitting inside you right now, listening, gently like this video, if something in you just moved. Not because a number matters, but because agreement anchors what is being released over you. Consider what it means that she chose it. Every religion you have brushed against tells you some version of a story where the reaching was a crime, where the wanting to know was the original sin. And that story serves a purpose. That story keeps people docile. That story means that every time you feel the pull to look behind the curtain, a reflex fires that tells you the pull itself is wickedness. Do you understand how efficient that is? You do not need guards if you can install the fence inside the prisoner. But the older telling says something else entirely. It says the reaching was the mechanism. It says that without the reaching there would have been no descent, and without the descent there would have been no light in the lower world, and without light in the lower world there would be no one listening to this right now with tears they cannot explain. The fall was not the failure. The fall was the delivery. And you have your own fall. You know the one. There is a period in your life that you consider your ruin. A year or a stretch of years when everything you had built came apart, when you did things you are still ashamed of, when you were somebody you would not want anyone to have seen. You have hidden that period. You edit it out when you tell people your story, and you have spent an enormous amount of energy making sure it never comes up. That period is where the light got in. I am not romanticizing your suffering. I am not telling you it was good. I am telling you that the shell you had built around yourself before it was airtight, and it took exactly that much force to crack it. And through the crack came the first real thing you ever felt. Ask yourself honestly, when was the last time you prayed with your whole body? When was the last time you asked a real question of the dark? It was not during your good years. It was in the ruin. The ruin is where you became reachable. The instruction she left was not written in a book. It was not carved into a temple wall or hidden in a scroll under a desert city. If it had been, it could have been burned, edited, sold, mistranslated by men who wanted power over your soul. She knew that. So she wrote it somewhere no empire could reach. She wrote it into the part of you that recognizes truth before your mind can argue with it. That instant, wordless yes you feel sometimes when you hear something real. That is the instruction responding. That is the seal cracking. You have felt that yes many times and dismissed it every time. Someone said something in passing, a stranger, a taxi driver, a woman in a waiting room, and it went through you like a current, and you thought about it for 3 days. You could not explain why it mattered. It was not even profound, but something in you stood up when it was said. That was not the sentence. That was the recognition apparatus in you confirming a match. It only fires for truth. It cannot be tricked. It is the one part of you that no advertisement has ever reached. But I need you to understand why you could not hear it until now. There is a reason the instruction stayed sealed for so long, and it is not because you were unworthy. It is because you were not yet emptied. A full vessel cannot receive. And for most of your life you were full. Full of other people's expectations, full of noise, full of borrowed beliefs you never chose, but inherited like furniture in a house you did not build. Every disappointment you have suffered in the last few years was not random cruelty. It was subtraction, it was emptying, and I know how it felt. It felt like losing. Think about what you have lost. Think about the relationship that ended in a way that made no sense. The job that dissolved right when you had finally settled. The friendships that quietly thinned out until you looked around one day and realized how few people actually knew you. You asked why. You asked what you did wrong. You searched for the flaw in yourself that must have caused it, and there was no answer, which made it worse. But there is an answer, and here it is. Those things were not taken because you failed. They were taken because they were not load-bearing. They could not hold what is coming, and the removal was mercy, even though it arrived dressed as loss. Type 777 if you are ready to hear the rest. Let me stay with the losses a little longer, because I do not want to move past them too quickly the way people usually do. It is easy to say that everything happens for a reason. It is a cheap sentence, and it has been used to silence more grief than it has ever healed. So I am not saying that. I am saying something more specific and more uncomfortable. I am saying that some of what you lost was taken, and some of it walked away on its own, and some of it you destroyed with your own hands, and all three of those categories ended in the same place, empty. And emptiness does not care how it was achieved. The vessel that was drained by betrayal and the vessel that was drained by its own foolishness are equally ready to be filled. This is why the worst people you have ever heard of sometimes wake up more completely than the good ones. Not because badness is a virtue, because collapse is a doorway, and the ones who collapse hardest sometimes fall all the way through it. You do not have to have been good to be chosen for this. Understand that. If you have been waiting to become worthy before you allow yourself to believe any of this applies to you, you will wait forever, because the qualification is not moral. The qualification is that you are empty and you are still listening. There is an old teaching, older than most religions you would recognize, that says the world you see was not made by the highest source, it was made by something lesser. Something that believed it was alone, that believed it was the only power that shaped a world in the image of its own blindness. And that is why the world runs the way it does. That is why systems reward the ruthless. That is why the loudest voices are so often the emptiest. That is why kindness so frequently looks like weakness here. You are not imagining the wrongness, you are perceiving it accurately. The wrongness is structural. Now understand what that means for you personally. It means you have spent your entire life trying to succeed inside a game whose rules were written by something that cannot see. And when you failed at that game, you assumed you were the problem. You never once considered that the game itself was the problem. This is the first crack in the seal. This is where the instruction begins to become audible, not as a voice from the sky, but as a sudden, sober clarity about the shape of the thing you have been trapped inside. Look at how the world is arranged, and tell me it was designed by something that loves. Look at how a person can work every day of their life and end with nothing. Look at how the tender ones are ground down first. Look at how everything beautiful is immediately measured, priced, and converted. You have felt this since you were young. You noticed as a teenager that the adults around you were exhausted and pretending not to be, and you promised yourself you would never end up like that, and then the machine took you anyway, gently, over years, the way it takes everyone. But knowing you are in a cage is not the same as being free. Some people learn this truth, and it destroys them. They become bitter. They become the ones who see through everything and build nothing. They mistake cynicism for awakening. That is not what Sophia left for you. Her instruction is not a diagnosis. It is not a complaint about the world. It is something to do. And that is where most people stop, because doing requires more courage than knowing. I have to be blunt about the cynics for a moment, because there is a real danger here, and it is one of the most common ways this path fails. When a person first sees the structure, there is a rush of power in it. Suddenly they understand everything. Suddenly every conversation is transparent to them. They can see the motive behind the kindness, the fear behind the ambition, the emptiness behind the celebration, and it feels like superiority. It feels like they have been let into a room that other people are locked out of. And then a year passes and they have not built anything. They have not loved anyone more deeply. They have not become gentler or braver or more useful. They have simply become harder. They have become the person at the table who cannot let anything be simple. And the light that was moving in them has gone still, because light that is not transmitted eventually stops circulating. Seeing through the world is the beginning. It is not the destination. Do not build a house at the door. Let me tell you about a man I want you to imagine. He is not a saint. He is not special in any way the world would measure. He worked a job he did not hate but never loved. He kept a small apartment, paid his bills on time, called his mother on Sundays. And every night, around 3 in the morning, he woke up for no reason, no dream, no noise, just awake, staring at the ceiling, with a feeling in his chest like something was standing at the edge of his life waiting to be let in. He went to doctors. He tried the pills. He tried the routines. Nothing worked, because nothing was broken. One night, instead of fighting it, he sat up in the dark and asked a simple question out loud. He said, "What do you want from me?" And nothing answered, not with a voice. But by morning, something in him had changed. Not dramatically. He did not quit his job or sell his belongings or run into the desert. He just began saying no to things he had always said yes to. Small things, conversations that drained him, obligations that meant nothing, habits that dulled him. And within a year, his entire life was different. Not because he built something new, but because he stopped feeding what was eating him. That is closer to the instruction than any philosophy you will ever read. And I want you to notice what he did not do, because this is where the story gets useful. He did not go looking for a teacher. He did not buy a system. He did not find a community that would tell him he was special. He did the one thing that nobody sells, because nobody can sell it. He stopped participating in his own diminishment. There is no product for that. There is no course. It costs nothing, and it is the hardest thing in the world. 6 months in, his oldest friend stopped speaking to him. There was no argument. There was simply a slow cooling, and then a silence, and then nothing. And he sat with that for a long time and eventually understood something that hurt to understand. That friendship had never been between two people. It had been an arrangement in which one person was consistently the audience and the other was consistently the performer. And when the audience stopped clapping, there was nothing underneath. You have a friendship like that, possibly several. You know exactly which ones, and you have known for years, and you have kept them going, because ending them would require you to admit that a large portion of your life has been transactional in a way you find humiliating. Type 1111 if you have already begun saying no. Here is something that will disturb you before it comforts you. Most of the suffering in your life was not caused by attack. It was caused by consent. You agreed. Over and over, quietly, without noticing, you agreed to things that cost you your light. You agreed to be the reliable one who never needs anything. You agreed to swallow the comment instead of answering it. You agreed to stay in the room where you were slowly disappearing because leaving felt like cruelty. Nobody forced you. That is the hardest part to accept. And it is also the door, because whatever you agreed to, you can withdraw agreement from. I know that lands hard. I know part of you wants to argue with it, and you should, because there are situations in a human life where there was genuinely no choice, where a child had no power, where a person was trapped by circumstance in a way that no amount of inner clarity could have changed. I am not talking about those. I am talking about the 100 small daily agreements you are making right now, as an adult, with full capacity, which you have convinced yourself are obligations. You are not obligated to answer every message immediately. You are not obligated to explain yourself to people who have already decided. You are not obligated to attend the gathering that will cost you 3 days of recovery. You are not obligated to keep the peace in a room where the peace is only ever maintained by your silence. Every one of those is a choice you have been making so consistently that it has stopped feeling like a choice. I want you to think of a specific person right now. You already know who. There is someone in your life whose presence makes you smaller, not through violence, not through anything you could describe to a stranger and be believed, but through a slow, steady pressure that has shaped you into a smaller version of yourself over years. You have made excuses for them. You have explained their behavior to yourself so many times that the explanation has become a part of your identity. And every time you consider stepping back, guilt arrives instantly, precisely on schedule, like something trained. That guilt is not conscience. Learn the difference. Conscience corrects you when you have harmed someone. Guilt of this kind arrives when you have simply stopped being useful to someone. It has a different texture. It is heavier, and it is louder, and it does not go away when you make amends, because there is nothing to amend. It is a leash. And you have been trained your whole life to mistake the leash for love. Sit with the distinction, because it will save you years. Real conscience has a specific object. It says, you said that thing, and it landed badly, and you should repair it. It is precise. It can be satisfied. You do the repair, and it goes quiet. The other thing has no object. It is diffuse. It says, you are bad, generally, in a way that no action can resolve. It arrives most strongly at the moment you consider putting yourself first. It is not information. It is an alarm someone else installed in you, and like all alarms, it can be disconnected once you locate the wiring. Sophia knew this would happen. She knew that a fragment of light placed in a dark world would be surrounded immediately by things that feed on light, not monsters with teeth, nothing so obvious, just arrangements. Just relationships and jobs and social structures designed, whether anyone intended it or not, to convert your energy into someone else's comfort. And so she did not leave you a weapon. She left you something better. She left you the ability to recognize the arrangement while you are standing inside it. That recognition is happening right now. That uncomfortable feeling in your stomach as you listen, that is not anxiety. That is recognition trying to become decision. Gently like this video if you felt that. There is a reason she did not leave a weapon, and it is worth understanding. A weapon requires an enemy. And the moment you decide that certain people are the enemy, you have accepted the logic of the world you are trying to leave. You have agreed to fight on its terms. And the world always wins on its own terms, because it invented them. The people who have drained you are not villains. Most of them are fragments too, buried deeper, running programs they did not write, taking from you because nobody ever taught them another way to feel full. Some of them would weep if they truly saw what they had done. This does not mean you stay. It means you leave without hatred, which is the only kind of leaving that actually frees you. Hatred keeps you tethered. You can move 1,000 miles away from someone you hate and still be living in their house. Now let me speak about the years you think you wasted. This is where most people carry their deepest shame. You look back at a decade and you cannot account for it. You do not know where it went. You have no achievements to point to, no monument, nothing you could hold up as proof that the time mattered. And when you are alone at night, that is the thought that finds you, that you have been given a life and you have squandered it, and the window is closing and it is probably already too late. Hear me. Nothing was wasted. Not 1 year, not one of those long gray seasons where you simply survived, because what was happening in those years was not visible from the outside. You were being made unable to be satisfied by cheap things. That is a rare and expensive process. Most people never undergo it. They find their small comfort at 25 and they live inside it until they die, and they call that a good life. You could not do that. Every time you tried to settle, something in you would not let you rest. That is not restlessness. That is the instruction working underneath your awareness, refusing to let you fall asleep permanently. And there is something else you need to know about those years. In every single one of them, at least once, you were shown something, a moment, a stranger's kindness that landed strangely hard, a dream you woke from crying without knowing why, a song that opened something, a morning where, for no reason at all, the light on the wall made you certain that everything was somehow all right. You dismissed those moments. You called them moods, but they were not moods. They were signal. They were confirmation being sent to you at intervals so that you would not completely lose the thread. Count them if you can. You will find more than you expected. Type 222 if you have received those moments. I want to say something about the specific texture of those moments, because most people have never had them described and therefore never realize how many they have collected. They almost always arrive when you are doing something ordinary. Driving, washing dishes, walking somewhere you have walked 1,000 times. They almost never arrive during ceremonies designed to produce them. This is not an accident. Ceremony creates expectation, and expectation creates a target, and the thing that reaches you does not fill targets. It arrives sideways, when your guard is down, when you are too bored to defend yourself. They last between 2 and 30 seconds. Longer than that, and it is usually emotion rather than signal, and they leave a residue. Hours later, you will still feel slightly rearranged. That residue is the tell. Emotion drains and leaves you tired. Signal leaves you quieter and more certain. And they never contain instructions. This surprises people. They want a message. They want to be told what to do. But the moments do not do that. They only ever say one thing in 1,000 different forms. And the thing they say is this: you are not abandoned, and you are not imagining it. That is the entire content. That is all it ever needed to be, because everything else you were always capable of working out yourself once you knew that much. Now I will tell you the shape of the instruction itself, because you have waited long enough. It is not complicated. Truth almost never is. Complexity is what people build when they want to sell you something. The instruction Sophia left has 3 movements, and every one of them will cost you something, which is why so few people ever complete it. The first movement is this: stop consenting to what diminishes you. Not dramatically, not with speeches, simply stop. Withdraw your agreement from the arrangements that convert your life into someone else's convenience. You will not need to announce it. The moment you genuinely stop consenting, the arrangement begins to dissolve on its own, because it was only ever held together by your participation. This is why people who awaken often lose friends without ever having an argument. Nothing was fought. Something was simply no longer fed. Understand how this works practically, because the word withdraw sounds passive, and it is not. Withdrawal is the most active thing you will ever do, because every fiber of your conditioning will fight it. You will feel like you are being cruel. You will feel like you are becoming the kind of person you always disliked. That feeling is the conditioning defending itself, and it will use your own values as ammunition, because your values are the strongest weapon anyone has ever had against you. Here is how it will actually look. You will decline an invitation, and you will not offer a reason. That is it. That is the whole revolution, and you will feel sick for about 4 hours. And then something in your chest will unlock that has been locked since you were 11 years old. And you will realize, with a kind of horror, how simple it was and how many years you spent not doing it. Then you will do it again the next week, and someone will comment on it, and you will not defend yourself. Not defending yourself is the second layer, and it is harder than the first, because defending yourself feels like the only way to remain a good person in someone else's story. Let their story be wrong about you. That is the price. Their story was always going to be wrong about you. The only question was whether you spent your life paying to correct it. The second movement is harder. Remember what you actually are, and then live as though you believe it. This is not affirmation. This is not repeating words at a mirror. It is a practical decision that has to be remade every single day. When someone treats you as though you are small, you do not argue with them. You simply do not agree. When circumstance tells you that you are a body that will fail and a name that will be forgotten, you do not debate it. You know something that circumstance does not know, and you carry that knowing into the room with you. People will feel it. They will not be able to name what changed about you, but they will feel it. The difficulty with this movement is that remembering is not a one-time event. Nobody tells you that. Everyone imagines awakening as a threshold you cross, after which you are simply awake, the way you are simply awake after sleeping. It does not work like that. Remembering has a half-life. You will remember completely on a Sunday night, and by Wednesday afternoon you will be back inside the small self, reacting to an email as though your existence depended on it. That is not failure. That is the nature of a fragment inside dense matter. Gravity pulls. You will have to remember again and again, 10,000 times if necessary, and here is the mercy in it. Each remembering is faster than the last. The first one might take you a month of struggle. Eventually it takes you 4 seconds and a breath. The path does not get shorter. You get quicker at walking it. The third movement is the one almost nobody reaches. Give the light away. Not your energy, not your time to whoever demands it. That is the trap you just escaped. I mean something different. I mean that when you meet another fragment, and you will, you recognize them and you do not stay silent. You say the true thing. You break the pleasant surface of the conversation and you tell them what you see. Most of the time, it will be uncomfortable. Sometimes it will cost you the relationship, but every so often it will crack a seal in someone who has been waiting their entire life for one person to say it out loud, and that person will go on to crack 10 more. That is the whole instruction. Withdraw, remember, transmit. Say Amen if you receive it. I know what you are thinking. It sounds too simple to be worth 30,000 years of concealment, but consider how few people you have ever met who actually do it. Consider how much of the world is built specifically to prevent it. Every advertisement you have ever seen exists to make you consent. Every social pressure exists to make you forget. Every fear of being thought strange exists to keep you from transmitting. The instruction is simple. Living it is the hardest thing a human being can attempt. Let me speak to the part of you that is afraid. Because it is there and it has been there for a long time, and pretending otherwise will help nobody. You are afraid that if you actually do this, you will end up alone. That is the real fear. Not poverty, not failure, loneliness. You are afraid that if you stop performing the person everyone expects, there will be no one left who loves you, because the love you have received has always been contingent on the performance. That fear is not irrational. Some of it will come true. You will lose people. I am not going to lie to you and say otherwise. But listen carefully to what actually happens, because the people who go through this never describe it the way they feared. They do not describe emptiness. They describe space. And into that space, within a season or two, come people they could never have met while they were still pretending. Real ones. Fewer, but real. And here is the strange thing they all report. They say the loneliness they felt while surrounded by people was far worse than the solitude they felt after. You already know this is true. You have felt more alone in a crowded room than you have ever felt by yourself at night. Type 555 if you know exactly what that means. Let me sit inside that loneliness with you for a moment instead of rushing to fix it, because the rushing is part of the problem. There is a particular loneliness that belongs only to people who are carrying something they cannot name. It is not the loneliness of having no company. You may have plenty of company. It is the loneliness of never once, in your entire life having been fully seen by another person, of having every relationship built on a partial version of you, edited for the audience, with the real thing kept in the basement. And the cruelty of it is that you cannot blame anyone. Nobody hid you. You hid yourself, for good reasons, because the 1 or 2 times you showed the whole thing it did not go well. Someone laughed. Someone got frightened. Someone used it against you later. And you concluded, reasonably, that the whole self was not safe for public display. So you built the presentable version, and you have been maintaining it for decades, and the maintenance costs more than you have ever calculated. Every hour of every day, a small percentage of your available energy goes to the upkeep of a person who does not exist. That is why you are tired in a way that sleep does not touch. The moment you stop maintaining it, that energy comes back, all of it, at once. And people describe that return in almost identical language. They say it felt like waking up in their own body for the first time. There is a season coming for you, and it has already started, though you may only recognize it in hindsight. Things are going to become clear at a speed that will unsettle you. Situations you have been confused about for years are going to resolve into obvious shape in a matter of weeks. You will suddenly understand why a certain person behaved the way they did. You will suddenly see what a certain door was actually protecting you from. This clarity is not you becoming smarter, it is fog lifting. And fog only lifts when something has finished burning off. Do not panic when the clarity arrives. Some people receive it and immediately go into grief because they see how much time they gave to what did not deserve it. That grief is allowed. Feel it. But do not build a house in it. Grief that stays too long becomes bitterness, and bitterness is just another cage with better decoration. Let yourself mourn the years, and then let yourself be astonished that you got out at all. Most do not. I want to say something now about the people who did not get out, the ones in your family, the ones you grew up watching, because part of what has held you back is loyalty to their suffering. You have felt, without ever putting it into words, that it would be a betrayal to live differently than they did, to be happier than your mother, to be freer than your father, to break a pattern that everyone before you was crushed by. There is a strange guilt in surviving what your bloodline did not survive. Release that. You are not abandoning them by rising. You are the answer to something they prayed for without knowing how to say it. Every generation carries the weight forward until someone finally sets it down, and setting it down is not disrespect, it is completion. The ones who came before you are not diminished by your freedom. In some way you will not understand until later they are included in it. Think about the specific inheritance you are carrying, not money, the other kind. The way your family handles anger, the way they handle money, whether it is hoarding or spending, or a strange shame around both. The silence that descends when a certain subject comes up, the thing that happened 2 generations ago that nobody has ever explained to you, but whose gravity you can feel in every family gathering. You did not choose any of that, and you have been paying for it since birth. And here is the difficult part. You have also been transmitting it to your children if you have them, to your partner, to anyone who gets close enough. Not deliberately, the way weather is transmitted. And the only place the transmission can stop is in a person who notices it while it is happening, which is a nearly impossible thing to do, and is precisely what you are being asked to do now. Say amen if you are willing to be the one who sets it down. There is also the matter of what you do with your ordinary days, because this is where most awakenings die. People have the revelation. They feel the fire. And then Tuesday arrives with its bills and its traffic and its small humiliations, and the fire goes out, and 6 months later they are exactly who they were before, telling themselves a story about the time they almost changed. So, let me give you something practical, because Sophia was not a philosopher, she was a maker. Every morning, before you speak to anyone, before you look at a screen, Take 60 seconds, not an hour, 60 seconds. And in those 60 seconds, do only one thing. Remember what you are. Do not ask for anything. Do not solve anything. Simply hold the awareness that you are a fragment of something older than the world, temporarily wearing a life. That is all. 60 seconds. Then, go about your day. It sounds too small to matter. It is the most important thing you will do, because the world will spend the next 16 hours telling you the opposite, and if you have not established the truth first thing, you will be arguing from a losing position all day. Whoever speaks first shapes the frame. Speak first. And I want to be precise about the screen, because this is where almost everyone fails. The instant you look at a device, you have handed the framing of your day to a system that was engineered by extremely intelligent people to capture and sell your attention. That is not a conspiracy claim. That is the publicly stated business model. Within 90 seconds of looking, you will have absorbed 3 emotional states that were not yours, 4 pieces of information designed to alarm you, and at least 1 comparison that will quietly poison the next several hours. You cannot remember what you are while that is happening. It is not a matter of discipline. It is a matter of bandwidth. So take the 60 seconds first, before the flood. That is the entire technique. Then, at some point in your day, do one thing that has no purpose except that it delights you. Not productive, not improving, useless and delightful. Because the system that built this world cannot metabolize delight. It can only use what is useful. The moment you do something purely because it makes your spirit lighter, you have stepped briefly outside the machine, and each time you do that, the machine has slightly less hold on you. You will find when you try this that you have forgotten what delights you. This is one of the saddest discoveries people make, and almost everyone makes it. Ask someone what they enjoy that has no purpose, and watch them struggle. They will name things that are secretly productive: exercise, because health; reading, because improvement. Even their rest has been converted into maintenance for their labor. If you cannot remember, go back to before you were 12. Whatever you did then, before anyone asked you what you wanted to be, that is your direction, not the activity itself necessarily. The quality of it. Were you building? Were you exploring? Were you making up stories? Were you organizing small objects into systems? That impulse never left you. It just stopped being permitted. And at night, before you sleep, review the day for one question only: where did I consent to something that made me smaller? Not to punish yourself, simply to see it. Because what is seen loses its automatic power, and what is unseen runs your life without ever asking permission. Type 333 if you will begin this tomorrow. I want to add a 4th thing, but only after the first 3 have become habit, so do not start it yet. Just know it is coming. Once the 60 seconds and the delight and the review are steady, add this. Once a week, tell one person one true thing you would normally have kept to yourself. Not a confession, not a dramatic unburdening. Just one true thing that you would ordinarily have edited out. This is the training ground for the 3rd movement. You cannot transmit if your mouth has spent 40 years producing only safe sentences. The apparatus has atrophied. You have to rebuild it in low-stakes conditions before it will work when it matters. Now I want to tell you what happens on the other side of this, because you deserve to know what you are walking toward and not just what you are walking away from. Your body will change first, and this surprises everyone. The tension you have carried in your shoulders and your jaw for so long that you forgot it was there will begin to release. You will sleep differently. You will find yourself breathing more deeply without trying. This is because a significant amount of your physical tension has never been about your body at all. It has been the constant low-grade effort of maintaining a self that is not you. When you stop maintaining it, the effort stops, and your body finally puts down what it has been holding for decades. There may be a strange phase where you feel worse physically before you feel better. Old aches surface. You get tired at odd times. Emotion arrives without a story attached to it, which is disorienting because we are taught that feelings must be about something. Sometimes you will simply weep in the car for 11 minutes and have absolutely no idea why. That is stored material leaving. The body keeps what the mind refuses, and when the mind finally relaxes its grip, the body begins the long process of releasing what it has been carrying on the mind's behalf. Do not medicate that away too quickly if you can help it. Do not interpret it as decline, it is drainage. Your speech will change next. You will notice yourself saying fewer things, not because you have become withdrawn, but because you have stopped filling silence out of anxiety. You will say the true thing more often and the polite thing less often, and some people will find you refreshing and others will find you cold, and you will discover that you no longer need to manage which reaction you receive. You will also stop explaining. This is one of the clearest markers, and the people around you will notice it before you do. You will make a decision and someone will ask why, and you will realize, mid-sentence, that you are constructing a justification for a person who is not owed one, and you will simply stop talking. The silence will be uncomfortable for about 2 seconds, and then it will be the most spacious thing you have ever felt. Then, your circumstances will begin to move. And this is where people get confused, so listen closely. Things will not necessarily become easier in the way you imagined. You may not suddenly become wealthy. The dramatic external rescue is not usually how this works. What happens instead is stranger and better. The friction goes out of your life. The same amount of work produces less exhaustion. The same problems arrive, but they no longer take root in you. You will look at a difficulty that would have flattened you 2 years ago, and you will simply handle it and then move on, and later you will realize you never once panicked. That is the actual sign, not luxury, not applause, the absence of internal war. Gently like this video if you want that more than you want anything the world is selling. There will be provision though. I want to say that clearly, because there is a school of thought that insists spiritual seriousness requires material misery, and that is not what I am describing. What I am describing is a reordering of where things come from. Right now, most of what you have taken. You have gripped and pursued and strategized and outlasted. It works, but it costs you your nervous system, and everything acquired that way has to be defended that way forever. What comes after is different. Things arrive, not magically, through ordinary channels, through people, through opportunities that appear at the exact edge of your capacity, but without the grip, and you will notice that the things which arrive that way stay, while the things you seized always seem to slip through your hands eventually. Type 1212 if you are ready to stop gripping. I have to warn you about something. There is a period, usually beginning a few weeks after someone genuinely receives this, where everything appears to get worse. It is so predictable that it should be considered part of the process rather than an interruption to it. Old situations will flare. People who had gone quiet will suddenly reappear. Opportunities that you already declined will be offered again on better terms. Doubt will arrive with excellent arguments. Understand what this is. Nothing that has been feeding on you gives up its food source without one final attempt. That is not mystical. That is just how systems behave when they lose an input. They escalate. They offer more. And the offer will be genuinely tempting, because it will be shaped exactly to the specific thing you have always wanted. Pay attention to the shape of the offer when it comes, because it will tell you exactly what your weakness is. If you are lonely, it will come as a person. If you are ashamed of your finances, it will come as money. If you were never respected as a child, it will come as recognition, and that one is the most dangerous of all, because recognition feels like validation of the very path you are. Someone will offer you a platform, an audience, a title, and it will seem like confirmation, and it will be a hook. The test is always the same. Ask what it costs. Not in money. Ask what part of your voice you would have to soften. Ask what you would have to stop saying. If the answer is nothing, take it gladly. If the answer is anything at all, you have identified the hook, and you can decline it without drama. There is something else I want to address, and it is the question you have not asked out loud because it feels too self-important. The question is, why me? Why would anything place an instruction inside an ordinary person with an ordinary life who has failed at most things they have tried? Surely, if something truly wanted to reach the world, it would choose someone impressive. Here is the answer, and I want you to sit with it. The impressive ones were already bought. That is what impressiveness costs in a world like this. The people at the top of these structures paid for their position with the exact thing you still have. You were not chosen because you are extraordinary. You were left intact because you were overlooked. Your obscurity protected the very thing that makes you useful now. All those years you spent feeling invisible were years you were not being consumed. Say amen if you understand what you were being protected from. Let me put this another way, because it deserves more than one pass. Every system requires that entry be paid for with a specific currency, and the currency is always the same. It is the willingness to say the required thing, not to lie exactly, just to leave things out, to phrase it acceptably, to not mention the part that would cause trouble. Each level of any hierarchy demands slightly more of this than the last, which is why the people at the top of almost anything have almost nothing left of what they started with. They know it too. That is the part nobody says. Sit with a genuinely powerful person late at night, and eventually the same sentence comes out in one form or another. I do not know when I stopped meaning what I say. They are not villains. They are people who paid the toll 1,000 times without ever noticing the price adding up. You could not pay it. Every time you tried, something in you gagged. You said the wrong thing in the interview. You could not bring yourself to laugh at the joke. You were passed over for the promotion because you were not, in the words they used, a culture fit, and you took that as evidence of your inadequacy, when it was actually evidence of your intactness. There is a particular kind of person I want to speak to directly for a moment. The one who has already tried this and failed. Because you exist, and you are listening, and you are the most guarded person in this audience, and you have every right to be. You had an opening once, maybe years ago. Something cracked and light came in, and for a period of weeks or months you were different. You were kinder and clearer and less afraid, and you thought it was permanent. And then it closed, slowly, without any dramatic betrayal. It simply stopped being available, and you went back to your life, and you never told anyone how much that quiet closing hurt. And since then you have been careful. You listen to things like this with one hand on the door, because the worst pain is not never having had it. The worst pain is having had it and watched it leave. Here is what I want to tell you. It did not leave. You did not lose it. What happened was that the opening was the first movement only, and nobody told you there were two more, and a fragment that receives light without withdrawing consent and without transmitting will always return to baseline. Not because it was fake, because light that is only received and never circulated turns stagnant. That is not a punishment, that is a property. You were not abandoned, you were undertrained. And this time you know the other two movements, which changes everything. Say amen if that was you. I want to say something now about the people you will meet on the other side of this, because it is one of the strangest and most reliable parts of the whole thing, and nobody warns you about it. They start appearing, not many, not a crowd, but within a few months of genuinely beginning this, you will meet someone in the most ordinary circumstance imaginable, and within 4 minutes of conversation, something will have passed between you that has no business passing between strangers. You will both feel it. Neither of you will name it. and you will walk away from that encounter slightly stunned. This will happen repeatedly. In waiting rooms, at work, in the checkout line, at a funeral. And you will begin to understand that there is a distributed network of people carrying this, and that they recognize each other without any signal at all. The way two tuning forks find each other across a room. You have already had a few of these encounters in your life. You remember them. You have never been able to explain to anyone why a 15-minute conversation with a stranger you never saw again has stayed with you for 11 years. Now you know. And you will notice something else. The number of these encounters increases in direct proportion to how honest you are willing to be. When you were fully armored, you met nobody. When you began saying the true thing occasionally, you met one or two. When it becomes your normal way of speaking, they arrive constantly. This is not coincidence, and it is not mysticism. Armored people are invisible to each other. Every layer you drop makes you visible to the only people who were ever looking for you. There is one more warning I owe you before we move toward the close, and it concerns what happens when you get good at this. There is a version of a person, and you have met them, who has genuinely done the inner work and who has become insufferable because of it. They speak to everyone as though they are a patient. They diagnose the room. They cannot receive a simple complaint from a friend without turning it into an opportunity for depth. They have converted their awakening into a personality and then into a small, quiet tyranny. Do not become that. The test is simple, and you can run it weekly. Are you easier to be around than you were a year ago? Or harder, not deeper, not wiser, easier? Because everything true that happens inside a person eventually shows up as lightness, and if what is happening to you is producing heaviness in the people around you, something has gone sideways. The most awake people I have ever encountered were not identifiable as such. They were funny, they were unremarkable, they talked about the weather and asked about your mother. And then, once every few months, they said one sentence that rearranged your life and then went straight back to talking about the weather. That is what mastery looks like here, not luminosity. Ordinariness with one live wire running through it. Say amen if you would rather be that than impressive. Let me return to Sophia one last time, because there is a part of the story that is almost never told. When she fell, and when her light was scattered, she did not experience it as defeat. The old texts describe her turning back. The word they use is repentance, but it does not mean what modern ears hear. It does not mean shame, it means the turning of the face. She turned her face back toward the source, and in that turning, from the middle of the disaster, light re-entered everything. That is what she left you. Not a rule, a gesture, the turning of the face. From wherever you are, no matter how far in, no matter how much has been lost, the turning is always available, and it is always instant. You do not have to earn it. You do not have to clean yourself up first. You do not have to understand the theology. You simply turn, and the same thing that happened to her happens in you. This is why every genuine tradition, no matter how different their words, keeps arriving at the same posture, the turning, the facing, the moment where a person stops running the calculation and simply orients. It is not belief. Belief is a mental content, and it can be argued away. This is a direction. Directions cannot be argued with. A person facing east is facing east, regardless of what they think about geography. You can do it right now, listening to this, in whatever room you are in, with whatever mess your life is currently in. Nobody has to see it. It will not look like anything from the outside, but something will shift, and you will know. Do it now. Turn. Type 1010 if you just did. Now, stay in this for a moment before you rush back into your day, because what happens next matters. There is going to be a temptation to immediately do something dramatic, to make a phone call, to send a message, to blow something up. Resist that for at least a few days. Not because action is wrong, but because the first actions after an opening are usually just the old self trying to prove something. Let it settle. Let the knowing become steady before you build on it. What is real will still be real in a week. And when you do act, act small. Small and consistent will outlast dramatic and brief every single time. The person who changes one habit and keeps it for a year has traveled further than the person who overturns their entire existence in one weekend and quietly rebuilds the same life in a different city. I have watched people do that second thing many times. They sell everything, they move continents, they cut off their family in a single afternoon, and within 18 months they have reconstructed, in the new place with new people, the exact same arrangement they fled, because the arrangement was never the location. It was the pattern they carry, and patterns travel free of charge. You do not have to leave your life to leave your cage. Most people who complete this remain in more or less the same house, the same job, the same city. What changed was not the furniture. What changed was who was living inside it. Let me speak now about time, because you are worried about it, and you should be addressed honestly. You feel that you are late. Almost everyone who hears something like this feels that they are late. If you are past 40, the feeling is nearly unbearable, because you can do the arithmetic, and the arithmetic is not encouraging. You imagine what you could have done with these years if you had understood any of this at 25. But